She adopted a baby girl only to learn she was the billionaire CEO's heir. I'm not here to take her from you immediately, but I've been without my daughter for 9 months. 9 months of not knowing if she was alive, if she was safe, if someone was holding her when she cried. 9 months of waking up at night wondering if I'd ever hear her voice. Maren Holliday stared at the man standing in her doorway, watching his composure crack with each word, and felt the ground dissolve beneath her feet. The baby monitor on the hall table transmitted the soft, rhythmic breathing of 8-month-old Leora, napping upstairs completely unaware that the fragile world they'd built together was about to be torn apart by 3 strangers and a manila folder full of documents she hadn't seen coming. The woman beside him wore a steel gray suit and carried a leather briefcase that screamed expensive lawyer before she even opened her mouth. "Miss Holliday, I'm Fletcher Dane, representing Mr. Thayer Boone. We'd like to come inside and discuss this civilly." Civilly. As if there was anything civil about 3 people appearing at your door on a Tuesday morning with DNA tests and legal papers claiming your daughter belonged to someone else. Maren's fingers dug into the doorframe hard enough to hurt. "I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing here, but Leora is my daughter. I have the adoption papers." Everything was legal. Everything was... "Please." The man Thayer Boone raised one hand in a gesture that looked more like surrender than authority. His eyes were bloodshot, desperate, barely holding together. "I've been searching for her since the day her mother disappeared. Just let me explain. That's all I'm asking." Something in his voice stopped Maren's hand from slamming the door. Not trust, she was too terrified for trust, but recognition. The sound of someone drowning in the same kind of grief she'd carried for 2 years after her stillbirth. After Daniel left, after the universe proved that wanting something desperately didn't mean you got to keep it, she stepped back. The door opened wider. They filed into her small living room like a funeral procession, and Maren suddenly saw her home through their eyes, the second-hand couch with its faded floral pattern, the coffee table still marked with crayon from last week when Leora had gotten hold of the red one, medical textbooks stacked in the corner from her nursing shifts that she never seemed to find time to put away. Everything modest, everything hers, everything about to be judged. Thayer Boone looked like he'd been pulled from a Forbes cover shoot charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, a watch that caught the morning light in that particular way expensive things do, shoes polished enough to see your reflection. But his hair was chaos, and his eyes carried something haunted that designer clothes couldn't hide. Fletcher Dane sat without being invited, her briefcase clicking open with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. A younger woman with auburn hair pulled severely back entered behind them. "This is Sylvie Rhodes, my associate," Fletcher said, her tone professionally neutral in a way that felt deliberately calming. "Miss Holliday, we understand this must be shocking, but we have documentation that requires your immediate attention." Maren remained standing, arms wrapped around herself like armor. Every nurse instinct told her to sit, to project calm control. But every mother instinct screamed to run upstairs, grab Leora, and disappear before these people could take her. "What documentation?" Fletcher extracted a manila folder, handling the papers like they were evidence at a crime scene. 8 months ago, a baby girl was abandoned at Mercy General Hospital. No identification, no note, nothing except a hand-knitted blanket and a hospital bracelet indicating she'd been born approximately 3 weeks prior. You fostered her initially, then filed for adoption. Is that correct? The clinical recitation of Leora's arrival made it sound sterile, procedural. It erased the memory of that first night, Maren holding a baby who wouldn't stop crying, terrified she'd made a mistake, terrified she'd lose another child, terrified that opening her heart again would destroy what was left of her. "You already know I did." Maren's voice came out harder than she intended. "The state ran background checks. I went through every legal channel they have. Nobody came forward. Nobody claimed her. Because we didn't know where to look." Thayer's voice cracked the careful professional atmosphere like glass breaking. "Her mother took her while I was traveling. Cressida left everything: phone, credit cards, any way to trace her. She didn't want to be found. I didn't even know she'd given birth until I came home to an empty apartment." Sylvie pulled out her own documentation with practiced precision. Mr. Boone filed a missing persons report within 24 hours of discovering the disappearance. He hired 3 separate private investigation firms, He contacted every hospital, clinic, and women's shelter within 200 miles. He appeared on local news stations. He posted on social media with photos of Cressida while she was pregnant. He cooperated with the FBI's Missing Persons Unit for 8 months. Fletcher slid a single page across the coffee table toward Marin. The motion felt deliberately slow, giving her time to prepare for what was coming. This is a DNA test performed last week. The swab was obtained from a pacifier submitted by your adoption attorney as part of standard medical records. The results show a 99.98% probability that Thayer Boone is the biological father of the child you know as Leora. The words echoed in Marin's skull. 99.98%. Not maybe, not probably. Certainty. That's not possible. They told me, they said no family had come forward. They said, the baby was abandoned under Jane Doe protocols, Fletcher interrupted, her voice gentle now. There was no way to connect her to Mr. Boone's missing persons case because Cressida Bloom never used her real name at the hospital. She gave birth under a false identity, then left the infant on the hospital steps 3 weeks later. The systems don't talk to each other the way they should. It took Mr. Boone's investigator cross-referencing every infant placed in foster care within a 6-month window to find the connection. Marin's legs stopped working. She sank into the armchair across from them, her body making the decision her mind couldn't process. This isn't happening. There's a particular kind of dread that hits you in moments like this, not the sudden shock of an accident, but the slow, creeping certainty that the life you've been living was never really yours to keep. That moment when you realize the universe was just lending you happiness, and now it's come to collect. I know this is overwhelming, Thayer said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, closing the physical distance between them like he was trying to will her to understand. I know you've bonded with her. I know she calls you Mama. The word broke something in his voice. But she's mine. She's my daughter, and I've been losing my mind for 9 months, wondering if she was dead in a ditch somewhere, or... His voice shattered completely. He pressed his palms against his eyes, shoulders shaking. Marin's hands were trembling. She flattened them against her thighs, but the shaking wouldn't stop. Why did it take 9 months? Why now? Because the system failed everyone, Fletcher said with unusual bluntness. Mr. Boone's missing persons report listed an adult woman and an infant as missing persons. The Jane Doe infant found at Mercy General was entered into a completely separate database for abandoned children. No flag connected the 2 cases, because they were filed under different categories. It wasn't until Mr. Boone's investigator started manually comparing every abandoned infant with every missing infant report that we found the overlap. Sylvie produced another document. We verified the connection through the blanket. Cressida made it herself during her pregnancy. Mr. Boone has photographs of her knitting it in their apartment. The pattern is unique, custom designed. When the investigator saw the blanket in the case file photograph, he recognized it within seconds. Marin remembered that blanket, pale yellow, with an intricate cable pattern and tiny embroidered stars scattered along the border. She'd thought it was the only piece of her mother's love that Leora had been left with proof that somewhere, someone, had cared enough to create something beautiful for her. Now it felt like the tracking device that had led these people to her door. What do you want from me? Marin asked, though she already knew. The answer was sitting in Fletcher's briefcase, written on Thayer's face, visible in the way Sylvie kept glancing toward the ceiling where Leora slept. Joint custody, initially, Fletcher said. Mr. Boone understands that removing the child from the only home she's known would be traumatic. He's not interested in causing harm. But he has legal rights as the biological father, and those rights are particularly strong given that your adoption isn't finalized yet. The room tilted sideways. What do you mean not finalized? Your adoption petition was filed 4 months ago. It's still in the approval process. Standard timeline is 6 to 8 months. Which means legally, you're currently her foster parent, not her adoptive parent. If Mr. Boone asserts his parental rights now, the adoption will be halted pending custody determination. Marin felt like she was drowning in open air. So you're going to take her? No. Thayer's response came so fast it overlapped with her words. I'm not going to rip her away from you. I'm not trying to be cruel. But I am her father, and I've already missed 9 months of her life. I can't miss any more. I won't miss any more. The baby monitor crackled with a soft coo Leora stirring from her nap. In less than a minute, she'd be crying for her bottle. Marin knew her schedule better than she knew her own heartbeat, knew that Leora liked her milk warm but not hot, knew that she'd resist the diaper change until you started singing "You Are My Sunshine," knew that her favorite game was when you blew raspberries on her belly until she shrieked with laughter and kicked her legs. "I know things about her that you don't," Marin said, desperation making her voice raw. "I'm the one who was there for her first smile, her first tooth. The night she spiked a fever and I stayed awake until dawn making sure it came down. You can't just walk in here with a DNA test and erase 9 months of—" "You're absolutely right." Thayer's interruption was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I don't know those things, and I hate that I don't. Every single day, I imagine what I'm missing, but I want to learn. I want to be there for the next smile, the next milestone, the next midnight when she needs someone. I want to know my daughter." A cry pierced through the monitor. Leora was awake and asking for her mama. Marin stood on instinct, muscle memory taking over before thought could catch up. Then she froze mid-motion. "Can I?" "Of course," Fletcher said, her expression softening for the first time. "This is still your home. For now. For now." Those 2 words followed Marin up the stairs like a death sentence. Leora was standing in her crib, chubby hands gripping the rail, tears streaming down flushed cheeks. The moment she saw Marin, her arms shot straight up. "Mama! Mama!" Marin scooped her up and buried her face in Leora's hair, breathing in baby shampoo and the lavender lotion she smoothed on after every bath. The weight of her, the warmth, the way she immediately stopped crying and melted into Marin's chest. This was hers. This was her daughter. Except maybe she wasn't anymore. She changed Leora's diaper on autopilot, hands moving through the routine while her mind spiraled through impossible options. Run, pack a bag, and disappear. But where? And for how long? Thayer Boone looked like the kind of man who had infinite resources. He'd find them eventually. Hire a lawyer, contest his claims, argue that 9 months of searching while a baby sat in foster care meant he'd forfeited his rights. But he hadn't abandoned Leora. Cressida had. And he'd been desperately trying to find her the entire time. Compromise, whatever that meant when someone was trying to take half your heart. Leora babbled happily as Marin carried her downstairs, utterly oblivious to the 3 strangers in their living room and the battle being waged over her future. When she saw Thayer, she went silent, studying him with that serious, evaluating expression she always made around new people. Thayer rose slowly, moving like someone approaching a wild animal that might bolt. His eyes filled with tears that he didn't bother hiding. "She looks like my mother," he whispered, his voice breaking on each word. "Same eyes, same chin, same way of looking at you like she's reading your soul." Leora buried her face in Marin's neck, suddenly shy, her small hand fisting in Marin's shirt. "She needs a bottle," Marin said, filling the silence because silence felt dangerous. "And then she'll want to play. Her morning nap was shorter than usual today, so she'll probably be fussy in an hour." "May I watch?" Thayer asked. Not demanded. Asked. "I just want to see her. I won't touch her if you don't want me to. I just need to see that she's real." The request was so humble, so broken with longing, that Marin found herself nodding before conscious thought could object. She moved to the kitchen, acutely aware of Thayer following at a careful, respectful distance. Fletcher and Sylvie stayed in the living room, their low voices creating a wall of sound that Marin couldn't quite penetrate. The bottle warmed while Leora squirmed in Marin's arms, reaching for the refrigerator magnets she loved to pull off and examine. Marin set her in the high chair and handed her a teething toy to buy herself a few seconds to think. "How old is she now?" Thayer asked from his position near the doorway, like he wasn't sure he had permission to enter the kitchen fully. 8.5 months. She'll be 9 months next Tuesday. "What's her favorite food?" "Mashed sweet potato with a little cinnamon. And those puff snacks that dissolve instantly, she's obsessed with them. Her pincer grasp is improving every day. She can almost pick them up without help now." Thayer absorbed every detail like he was memorizing scripture. "What about sleeping? Does she sleep through the night?" "Mostly. She'll wake up once sometimes, usually around 3 in the morning. She just needs her pacifier repositioned, and she goes right back down." "Does she have a favorite toy?" Marin tested the bottle temperature against her inner wrist, then lifted Leora from the high chair. A stuffed elephant, gray with pink ears. She absolutely won't sleep without it tucked beside her. She settled into the kitchen chair, and Leora latched onto the bottle immediately, her eyes drifting half-closed in contentment. Thayer watched the entire feeding like he was witnessing something sacred and unreachable. "She's beautiful," he said so softly Marin almost didn't hear it. "Thank you. For taking care of her. For keeping her safe when I couldn't. For loving her when no one else was there to." The sincerity cracked something in Marin's chest. For the last hour she'd been casting him as the villain, the man who was going to destroy everything she'd built. But he wasn't trying to be cruel. He was just a father who'd lost his daughter and finally, impossibly, found her again. That didn't make this hurt any less. "What happens now?" Marin asked when Leora finished the bottle and started squirming to be released. Thayer watched as Marin set Leora on the playmat in the living room, surrounding her with soft blocks and textured books. "Fletcher will explain the legal options. But I want you to know, I'm not going to fight you for her like she's property. I want us to work together. For her." "Work together?" Marin's laugh came out sharp and bitter. "You have DNA results and biological rights and unlimited money for lawyers. I have 9 months of love and no legal standing whatsoever. What exactly is there to work out?" Fletcher must have been listening because she interjected smoothly from the living room. "Quite a bit, actually. Mr. Boone is proposing something unusual." Marin turned to face the lawyer directly. "Which is?" "A co-parenting arrangement. You would maintain primary custody given your established bond with the child and your role as her primary attachment figure. Mr. Boone would have unlimited visitation rights and equal say in major decisions, medical care, education, major life choices. The adoption would be suspended, but you'd be recognized as her legal guardian with parental rights." "That's not an adoption. I don't even know what that is." "It's a compromise," Thayer said. "It's both of us putting her needs ahead of our egos. You're right that taking her from you completely would traumatize her. But keeping me out of her life entirely when I've done nothing wrong except have a partner who made a terrible choice? That's not fair either. To me or to her." Marin looked down at Leora, who was gumming a soft block and drooling contentedly on the playmat. "And if I say no?" The silence stretched long enough to ache. Finally, Fletcher spoke. "Then Mr. Boone will file for full custody. Given that he's the biological father, that he filed missing persons reports and actively searched for 9 months, that he has substantial resources to provide for the child, and that the adoption isn't yet finalized, a judge would very likely rule in his favor." "How likely?" "I'd estimate 85 to 90% probability." The number landed like a punch. Marin sank onto the floor beside Leora, her legs simply refusing to hold her anymore. Leora immediately crawled into her lap, sensing distress the way babies always do, her small hands patting Marin's face as if to say, "I'm here." There's something nobody tells you about loving a child who might not be yours to keep. Every milestone becomes precious because it might be the last one you witness. Every bedtime story could be the final chapter. Every mama might be the one you never hear again. You start living in past tense while the present is still happening. "I need time," Marin managed. "I need to talk to my own lawyer. I need to think about what this actually means." "Of course," Fletcher said, standing and smoothing her suit. "We're not serving papers today. This was a courtesy visit to make you aware of the situation and Mr. Boone's preferred resolution." "A courtesy," Marin repeated, the word tasting like ash. Sylvie placed a business card on the coffee table with deliberate care. "We'll need your response within 72 hours. After that, we'll need to proceed with formal filing. 72 hours to decide whether to fight and lose everything, or compromise and lose pieces of everything slowly." Thayer lingered as the lawyers moved toward the door. He was staring at Leora with such naked longing that Marin felt an unexpected stab of sympathy pierce through her terror. "Can I?" He swallowed visibly. "Can I just touch her hand? Once? Before I go?" Every instinct screamed at Marin to say no, to build an impenetrable wall between this man and her daughter. But she heard herself say, "Okay." Thayer knelt on the floor at a careful distance, telegraphing every movement. Slowly, he extended his hand palm up toward Leora. Leora, curious about this new person in her space, reached out and grabbed his finger with her tiny fist. Thayer let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. Tears spilled down his cheeks unchecked. "Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Sophia. I'm your daddy. I've been looking for you for so long." "Her name is Leora," Marin said sharply, the correction automatic and defensive. "I named her Sophia, after my mother who died when I was 23, before Cressida took her and disappeared." They locked eyes across Leora, two parents, two names, two completely different versions of who this baby was supposed to be. Leora, oblivious to the war being waged over her identity, yanked playfully on Thayer's finger and grinned, revealing her two bottom teeth. "She has my smile too," Thayer whispered, like he was afraid speaking too loud would make the moment disappear. Then, with visible reluctance, he pulled his hand back and stood. 72 hours, Miss Holliday. I hope you'll choose the option that lets both of us be in her life. I hope you'll choose what's best for her, not what feels safest for us." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame, and looked back. "I mean what I said earlier. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to take her from the only mother she's ever known. I just want to be her father. Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive." Then they were gone, leaving only the echo of impossible choices. Marin sat on the floor holding Leora for a long time after the door closed, listening to the silence of her house and the sound of her world restructuring itself into something unrecognizable. She'd built this life so carefully after Daniel left. After losing Emma, her stillborn daughter, whose name she still whispered every night 3 years later. After 18 months of therapy and antidepressants, and learning how to wake up every morning without wanting to disappear. After finally believing she might deserve happiness again. Fostering Leora had terrified her. Opening her heart to another child who might leave felt like volunteering for a second round of grief. But the social worker had been persuasive, and something about the abandoned baby girl with the mysterious past had called to the broken places inside her that desperately wanted to heal. And now that mysterious past had knocked on her door with DNA evidence and lawyers. Her phone sat on the coffee table where she'd left it that morning back when her biggest crisis was whether she could trade shifts with Linda to make Leora's pediatrician appointment. She picked it up and scrolled to the name she needed. Avery Kellen, the lawyer who'd guided her through adoption paperwork, who'd promised everything was proceeding normally, who'd said she'd have her daughter officially within 6 months. The call went straight to voicemail. Marin waited for the beep, her voice shaking when she finally spoke. "Avery, it's Marin Holliday. I need you to call me back immediately. There's a man claiming to be Leora's biological father. He has lawyers and DNA tests and 72 hours to respond and I." Her voice cracked completely. "Please call me back. I don't know what to do." She ended the call and pulled Leora closer, breathing in her scent and trying not to imagine a future where someone else did this, where someone else was Mama. Leora squirmed free, wanting down to play. Marin watched her crawl toward her toy basket, completely unconcerned with adults and their devastating problems. The doorbell rang. Marin's heart stopped. Were they back already? Had they changed their minds about the 72 hours? But when she opened the door, it wasn't Fletcher or Thayer or Sylvie. It was a man with a professional camera and a press credential hanging from his neck. "Marin Holliday?" "Jason Ward, Channel 7 News. We heard tech billionaire Heir was at your residence this morning. Can you comment on the custody dispute?" Marin slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. Through the window, she watched a white van with the Channel 7 logo park at the curb. A woman with camera-ready hair emerged and began assembling a tripod on Marin's lawn. This was a nightmare layered on top of a nightmare. At least in nightmares, you eventually woke up. Her phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "There's a reporter on your lawn. Don't engage. Don't give them anything. This is Fletcher Dane. Mr. Boone apologizes profusely for the media attention. His legal team is issuing a statement requesting privacy. Someone in the investigator's office talked. He's furious." Another text immediately after. "For what it's worth, he's absolutely livid this leaked. This isn't the kind of man he is." Marin typed back with shaking hands. "Tell him to call off his lawyers if he wants privacy." The response came within seconds. "He can't. You know he can't. But he is sorry." She did know. Whatever happened next, Thayer Boone wasn't going to disappear. He wasn't going to quietly accept being erased from his daughter's life, which meant Marin had 3 choices. Fight, and almost certainly lose everything, including Leora. Or compromise, and lose Leora piece by piece as someone else became her father. And this was the option that had been whispering at the edges of her mind since the moment Thayer touched Leora's hand and broke down. Accept that love wasn't a zero-sum game, that a child could have two parents who adored her, that maybe sharing Leora was better than losing her completely. The thought felt like betrayal, like surrender, like admitting that 9 months of midnight feedings and first smiles and desperate love meant less than biology and blood. But it also felt like the only path that didn't end in devastation. Leora crawled back to her, babbling a stream of nonsense syllables that almost sounded like words. Ma, ba, da, da. Marin closed her eyes against tears that wouldn't stop. When she opened them, there was a black Mercedes parked behind the news van. Tinted windows prevented her from seeing inside, but somehow she knew. Thayer Boone was still there, watching from a distance, making sure his daughter was safe even though he'd just met her. The realization should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt inevitable. Her phone rang. Avery Kellen finally returning her call. Marin, I got your message. Tell me everything that happened. So she did. Every word, every document, every impossible detail. When she finished, silence stretched across the line, long enough that Marin wondered if the call had dropped. Marin, I'm so sorry. Avery finally said, if he has DNA evidence and documented missing persons reports showing he actively searched for 9 months, his parental rights are going to be nearly impossible to contest successfully. Nearly impossible isn't completely impossible. Another pause, longer this time. You're right, but it would be expensive. We're talking tens of thousands in legal fees. It would take months or even years. It would drag Leora through a custody battle during some of her most critical developmental years, and even after all that time and money and trauma, you'd still probably lose. So I should just give up? Just hand her over to a stranger? No, you should negotiate the best possible terms for a co-parenting arrangement. His proposal is actually quite generous, given his legal position. Many biological fathers in his situation would demand immediate full custody. But she's mine, Marin whispered. She's been mine for 9 months. I'm the one who was there. I know, honey, I know. But family court doesn't care who did the 3 a.m. feedings. It cares about biology and documented parental rights, and he has both. The truth settled over Marin like concrete hardening. She could fight with everything she had, spend every penny, every ounce of emotional energy, months or years of her life, on a battle she'd almost certainly lose. Or she could accept reality and try to salvage something from the wreckage. If I agree to his co-parenting proposal, Marin asked slowly, what does that actually look like in practice? Day to day? That would be negotiated between both legal teams. Visitation schedules, decision-making protocols, financial responsibilities, dispute resolution procedures. I can be present for all those discussions if you want. Financial responsibilities. Marin hadn't even considered that aspect. Thayer Boone was a billionaire. He could provide for Leora in ways Marin's nursing salary never could. The best schools, the best healthcare, opportunities that would otherwise be completely out of reach. Was it selfish to deny Leora those advantages just because Marin wanted to be her only mother? The question made her feel physically sick. Set up a meeting, Marin said, the words coming out flat and defeated. With Boone and his lawyers, and you. I want everything documented in writing. That's smart. I'll contact Fletcher Dane this afternoon and arrange something. After the call ended, Marin carried Leora upstairs for her afternoon nap. The routine was so deeply embedded that her body moved through it automatically, while her mind churned. Close the blackout curtains, turn on the white noise machine, settle into the rocking chair by the window while singing softly. Leora's eyes drooped, her body going boneless in Marin's arms. Within minutes, she was deeply asleep. Marin should have placed her in the crib and gone downstairs to research lawyers, prepare arguments, do something productive. Instead, she held her daughter and cried in complete silence, tears falling onto Leora's hair. When people ask what you do for your child, they imagine dramatic scenarios. Stepping in front of a speeding car, fighting off a dangerous attacker. Some grand, heroic sacrifice that makes for good storytelling. They don't imagine this, sitting in a rocking chair holding your sleeping baby, accepting that loving her might mean learning to share her. That sometimes being a good mother means knowing when to fight and when to compromise. That the hardest battles aren't the ones you win, they're the ones where you have to choose what to lose. Marin finally placed Leora in her crib, tucking the gray elephant beside her and pulling the yellow blanket, Cressida's blanket, the one that had betrayed them, up to her chin. She traced her fingers over the embroidered stars, wondering about the woman who'd created this. What had she been thinking with every stitch? Had she loved Leora while making it? Had she planned to keep her daughter and only changed her mind later? What kind of darkness had she been drowning in? And where was Cressida now? Why hadn't she come forward when Heir filed missing persons reports across 8 months? Those questions would have to wait. Right now, Marin had more immediate concerns. The man in the Mercedes outside, the lawyers with their documents, the 72-hour deadline ticking down like a bomb. She went to her bedroom and retrieved the folder labeled Leora, Adoption Papers, from her dresser. Inside was every document chronicling their journey together. Foster placement paperwork, home visit reports, medical records from Leora's 8-month checkup where she'd charmed the pediatrician by clapping on command. Photos, too, hundreds of them. Leora's first real smile, first bath in Marin's apartment, first time trying solid food, her face scrunched adorably as she decided whether she liked mashed banana. First Mother's Day, when Marin had propped her up for a photo and whispered, "You made me a mama," again. She closed the folder quickly before tears could damage the photographs. Her laptop sat on the dresser. She opened it and did what any person would do in her situation. She Googled Heir Boone. The results were overwhelming. Tech billionaire Heir Boone revolutionizes cloud security. Boone Industries, valued at $4.2 billion in latest funding round. The man behind the code, an in-depth profile of Heir Boone. She clicked on the Forbes profile piece, noting it was dated 8 months ago, right before Cressida disappeared with their daughter. The article painted a familiar tech success story. Driven entrepreneur builds company from college dorm room project into cybersecurity empire. Raised by a single mother after his father abandoned them when Heir was 6. Worked his way through MIT while supporting his mother through cancer treatments. Launched Boone Industries at 25. Photos showed Heir at tech conferences, shaking hands with senators, accepting innovation awards on spotlit stages. Near the end, a single paragraph addressed his personal life. Boone guards his private life carefully, though sources confirm a long-term relationship with textile artist Cressida Bloom. When pressed about work-life balance, Boone admits it's his greatest struggle. "I've built this company at the expense of almost everything else," he says. "I'm trying to learn when to step back. I'm not sure I'm succeeding." Marin scrolled to the comments section, something she normally avoided, but today she wanted to know what strangers thought of the man disrupting her life. "Classic workaholic. His girlfriend has my sympathy. Brilliant mind, but probably terrible in relationships. My ex was exactly like this. These tech billionaires are all the same, married to their companies, not their partners." She closed the laptop, but the picture had already formed. Heir Boone was driven, work-obsessed, and possibly based on that self-aware quote about failing at balance conscious that he'd neglected his personal life in service of professional success, which made Cressida's disappearance more understandable. A woman 8 months pregnant, alone while her partner traveled the world building an empire, facing imminent motherhood without the support she desperately needed. Marin could almost understand why she'd run. Abandoning a newborn on hospital steps, that was still harder to comprehend or forgive. Her phone buzzed a text from Avery. "Meeting set for tomorrow, 2 p.m., my office. Fletcher Dane, Heir Boone, and 1 additional attendee. Should I arrange childcare for Leora?" Marin typed back, "Who's the additional person?" Boone is bringing a child psychologist. He wants to discuss transition strategies that minimize trauma to Leora. Despite everything, the fear, the anger, the sense of her world collapsing, Marin felt grudging respect for that detail. He was thinking about Leora's emotional well-being, not just asserting his legal rights. She confirmed the meeting time and texted her neighbor Mrs. Chen, who'd been babysitting since Leora was 4 months old and knew her routine perfectly. The afternoon crawled past. Marin attempted normal activities, laundry, meal preparation, cleaning, but her mind kept circling back to tomorrow's meeting. What would she say? What could she demand? What did co-parenting even look like when one parent was a complete stranger? When Leora woke from her nap, Marin brought her downstairs and established her in the playpen while starting dinner. Something simple: pasta with marinara, the kind of meal requiring minimal attention because Marin's thoughts were definitely elsewhere. She was stirring the sauce when she noticed through the window. The Mercedes was gone. The news van too. Her quiet street had returned to its usual peaceful state. For now, the rest of the evening passed in a blur of baby care that usually filled Marin with joy but tonight felt bittersweet. Bath time, where Leora normally splashed water everywhere while Marin pretended shocked outrage. Story time, when Leora would help by slapping her palm against board book pages. Bedtime routine, ending with Marin singing "You Are My Sunshine" until Leora's eyes fluttered closed. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. She couldn't finish. The next line, "Please don't take my sunshine away," felt too painfully on the nose to sing aloud. After Leora was asleep, Marin poured wine and sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. Time to research properly. If she was negotiating with Heir tomorrow, she needed to understand exactly who she was dealing with. She found articles about Boone Industries' trajectory, interviews where Heir discussed cybersecurity philosophy, even a TED Talk about innovation and disruption. But what stopped her was a video from a tech conference 3 years ago. Heir was on a panel about work-life balance, ironic given everything she'd read, when an audience member asked about children. "Someday," Heir had answered, his smile genuine, "when I'm less terrified of completely screwing it up." My father left when I was 6, and I watched my mother work 3 jobs just to keep us fed and housed. I swore I'd never create that kind of instability for a child. So yes, I want kids. But I want to be genuinely present for them, not just physically there. I want to do it right. The video was dated 8 months before Cressida became pregnant. Marin closed the laptop, uncomfortable with the picture forming. This wasn't a villain. This was a man who'd wanted to be a good father and had that opportunity stolen from him. But that didn't change the fact that his pursuit was stealing Marin's chance at motherhood. Both things could be true simultaneously. The situation could be tragic for everyone involved. That didn't make it hurt any less. She finished her wine and went to bed early, though sleep proved impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Heir's face when Leora grabbed his finger, that mixture of raw joy and devastating grief. Tomorrow would determine everything. Tomorrow she'd sit across a conference table from the man with legal claim to her daughter and negotiate for fragments of the life she'd thought was permanently hers. Tomorrow she'd have to decide what she was willing to sacrifice to keep any piece of Leora in her life. And tonight, lying in darkness, listening to the baby monitor transmit Leora's peaceful breathing, Marin let herself grieve for what she was about to lose. Morning arrived with offensively beautiful sunshine and cloudless blue skies. Marin dressed with deliberate care, professional, but not overly formal. She wanted to project confidence and capability, the image of a competent mother who deserved to keep her child. Mrs. Chen arrived at noon, taking one look at Marin's face before pulling her into a wordless hug. "Whatever you're facing, you'll survive it," Mrs. Chen said with quiet certainty. "You're stronger than you believe." Marin desperately hoped she was right. Avery's office occupied a renovated building downtown, all exposed brick and oversized windows, designed to feel open and trustworthy. The receptionist directed Marin to conference room B, where Avery was already reviewing documents spread across the large table. "Hey," Avery greeted her, offering a supportive smile that didn't quite hide her concern. "How are you holding up?" "I'm here. That's approximately all I can manage right now." "That's more than enough." Avery squeezed her shoulder gently. "Remember, we're negotiating from a position of established care. You've been her primary caregiver for 9 months. That counts for something. Does it count more than DNA? In a moral sense, absolutely. In a legal sense." Avery trailed off diplomatically. The conference room door opened. Fletcher Dane entered, followed by Sylvie Rhodes and 2 other people. Heir looked more composed than yesterday, but still carried that haunted quality around his eyes that expensive clothes couldn't hide. The other person was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and graying blonde hair. This is Dr. Nina Westbrook, Fletcher introduced. Child psychologist specializing in attachment and early childhood development. They took seats around the conference table, Marin and Avery on one side, Heir and his team facing them across the polished wood. Like opposing armies negotiating terms of ceasefire, Fletcher opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency. Thank you all for coming. Before formal negotiations begin, Dr. Westbrook has prepared information about best practices for custody transitions involving infants. We thought this might help frame our discussion productively. Dr. Westbrook pulled out a tablet, her voice calm and measured. When dealing with custody changes at this age, our primary concern is maintaining secure attachment bonds. Leora, or Sophia, depending on preference, is at a critical developmental stage. She's formed a primary attachment to Miss Holiday. Disrupting that suddenly and completely would cause genuine psychological harm. Marin felt gratitude toward this stranger validating her importance. However, Dr. Westbrook continued carefully, children are remarkably capable of forming secure attachments to multiple caregivers. Research consistently shows that shared custody arrangements can succeed if handled properly. The key factors are gradual introduction, absolute consistency, and genuine cooperation between parents. What does gradual introduction actually look like in practice? Heir asked. It was his first time speaking, and his voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. Initially, short visits with Miss Holiday present, perhaps 30 minutes to an hour, several times weekly. This allows Leora to become familiar with you in a context she perceives as safe. Over time, and we're discussing weeks, not days, we'd gradually extend visit duration and begin introducing brief separations, eventually building toward overnight visits, then weekends. How long until I can have her for an entire day? Heir pressed, leaning forward. Possibly 6 weeks. Perhaps longer. It depends entirely on Leora's adjustment. 6 weeks. Marin watched Heir process this timeline, saw his jaw tighten with frustration he was clearly trying to control. But to his credit, he simply nodded acceptance. What about decision-making? Fletcher asked. Medical care, education, religious upbringing? How do we establish clear protocols? Avery jumped in immediately. Miss Holiday has been making those decisions competently for 9 months. She knows Leora's complete medical history, her routines, her specific needs. Any custody arrangement must reflect her expertise as primary caregiver. Mr. Boone is her biological father, Sylvie countered smoothly. He has equal right to make decisions affecting his daughter's welfare. The tension in the room escalated noticeably. Gentlemen, ladies. Dr. Westbrook raised both hands diplomatically. This isn't actually about rights. This is about what's objectively best for the child. And what's best is having 2 parents who communicate effectively and make joint decisions with her well-being as the absolute priority. Easy to say. Marin spoke for the first time, her voice harder than intended. Significantly harder to do when you're strangers making decisions about someone you both love but have completely different relationships with. Everyone turned to look at her directly. She continued, gaining confidence. I don't know you, Mr. Boone. You don't know me. We don't know each other's values, our parenting philosophies, our views on discipline or education or healthcare or religion. How are we supposed to make genuinely joint decisions when we have zero foundation of trust? Heir leaned forward, his expression intensely earnest. Then, we build that foundation. Starting right now. Today. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's probably going to be incredibly difficult, but it's necessary. He paused, choosing words carefully. Miss Holiday. Marin, I know I'm disrupting your entire life. I know you see me as a threat to everything you've built, but I'm not trying to take her away from you. I'm trying to be part of her life. Those are fundamentally different things. Are they? Because from where I'm sitting, those look identical. Avery placed a gentle hand on Marin's arm, a subtle reminder to stay calm. But Marin couldn't contain the anger building for 24 hours. 9 months of midnight feedings, endless worry, fierce protective love, and some billionaire with a DNA test thought he could simply claim equal standing? Fletcher cleared her throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should focus on specifics. Dr. Westbrook has outlined a gradual introduction schedule. Let's discuss practical implementation. For the next hour, they negotiated details that felt simultaneously mundane and heartbreaking. Heir would visit 3 times weekly initially, always at Maren's house, always with her present. 30 minutes per visit to start. He could hold Leora, feed her, play with her, but Maren retained veto power if Leora showed distress. After 2 weeks, they'd reassess and potentially extend visit duration. After 4 weeks, Heir could bring Leora to his estate for short visits, still with Maren present. After 6 weeks, they'd begin brief separations, perhaps an hour or 2 with Heir alone. The timeline stretched before them like a roadmap to shared custody, each milestone representing a small death of the exclusive bond Maren had built with her daughter. "What about holidays?" Sylvie asked, pen poised over her legal pad. Maren's throat constricted. She hadn't even considered holidays. This year would be Leora's first real Christmas. Old enough to be excited about lights and wrapped packages. Old enough to remember fragments of magic. "Alternating years?" Fletcher suggested smoothly. "Mr. Boone gets Thanksgiving this year. Miss Holiday gets Christmas. Reverse next year." No. The word emerged sharper than Maren intended. Absolutely not. She's too young to be shuffled between houses on major holidays. "We either split the day, or we celebrate together." Heir looked surprised, but nodded slowly. "I can agree to that. At least for this year while she's adjusting." Small victories. Maren clung to them like lifelines. They moved on to medical decisions. Heir wanted notification of all appointments, presence at well-child checkups, consultation before any procedures or medications. "Even routine things?" Maren asked. "Like if she has a cold and needs children's Tylenol?" "No, that's standard day-to-day parenting judgment. I'm talking about non-emergency medical decisions. Vaccines, specialist referrals, anything surgical, obviously." That felt reasonable enough that Maren nodded acceptance. Education proved trickier. Leora wouldn't start formal schooling for years, but Heir wanted to establish principles now. Private school versus public, religious education versus secular, enrichment activities and developmental programs. "She's 8 months old," Maren said, exasperation bleeding through. "Can we possibly cross that bridge when it's actually relevant?" "I'd prefer to establish foundational principles now," Heir countered. "So we're not litigating these decisions later when time-sensitive enrollment deadlines force rushed choices." Avery intervened smoothly. "How about this? You both agree now to make education decisions jointly when the time arrives, prioritizing Leora's individual needs and demonstrated aptitudes over any predetermined agenda. Does that work?" Both Maren and Heir agreed, though Maren suspected they'd be revisiting this argument in a few years. The question of Leora's name hung unaddressed in the air like smoke. Finally, Fletcher brought it up directly. "Mr. Boone named the child Sophia at birth. Miss Holiday has called her Leora for 9 months. Legally, what name will appear on official documents?" Maren felt her chest constrict painfully. This wasn't just bureaucratic paperwork. This was about identity, about who had the right to define this child. "I chose Leora because it means my light," Maren said softly, meeting Heir's eyes across the table. "She brought light back into my life after years of suffocating darkness." "That name has profound meaning." "Sophia was my mother's name," Heir replied, with equal quiet intensity. "She died when I was 23, 6 months after beating cancer the first time, only to have it return more aggressively. I wanted my daughter to carry that legacy forward." Silence filled the conference room. 2 names, 2 meanings, 2 parents trying to claim their stake in a child's identity. "Doctor," Westbrook spoke gently, "may I make a suggestion? Children can have multiple names, middle names, nicknames, names used by different family members. What if both names have a place in her life?" "Sophia Leora Boone," Fletcher suggested, writing it on her notepad. "Or Leora Sophia. First and middle name, incorporating both." Maren looked at Heir. He looked back. In that extended moment of eye contact, she saw exhaustion mirroring her own. They were both tired of fighting. "Leora Sophia," Maren offered. "A genuine compromise. Since she's been Leora for 9 months, that maintains continuity. But you can call her Sophia when you're with her. She can know both names belong to her." Heir's jaw worked, emotion flickering visibly across his features. "Leora Sophia Holiday Boone? The hyphenated surname was a compromise neither particularly wanted, but both could survive. Marin nodded slowly. Okay. It was the first genuine agreement they'd reached without lawyers mediating every word. The meeting dragged on for another 90 minutes, covering financial arrangements. Heir would pay substantial child support, plus cover all medical expenses and future educational costs, emergency protocols, communication expectations between parents, and dispute resolution procedures if they couldn't agree on something major. By the time Fletcher distributed copies of the preliminary agreement pending formal legal documentation, Marin's head throbbed, and her heart felt thoroughly bruised. "We'll have official paperwork prepared by end of week," Fletcher said. "First visit can happen as early as tomorrow if Miss Holliday is comfortable with that timeline." Tomorrow, less than 24 hours before Heir Boone entered their lives permanently and irrevocably. "I need one more day," Marin said firmly, "to prepare mentally, to adjust emotionally. Friday he can come Friday." Heir looked like he wanted to argue, desperation clear in his expression, but forced himself to nod acceptance. "Friday. What time?" "Late morning. After her breakfast, before her nap. I'll be there." They stood. The meeting officially concluded. Marin felt hollowed out, like someone had surgically removed her insides and left only the shell standing. As everyone gathered belongings, Heir approached hesitantly. "Thank you. For compromising. For not making this uglier than it had to be." Marin couldn't bring herself to say you're welcome because she wasn't doing this willingly. She was doing it because the alternative was losing Leora completely. But she managed. "We both want what's best for her. We just disagree fundamentally on what that looks like." "Maybe we won't always disagree," Heir said with cautious optimism. "Maybe we'll figure this out." The hope in his voice felt painfully naive. But Marin was too exhausted to argue further. She left with Avery, who walked her to the elevator in supportive silence. "You handled that remarkably well," Avery said. "I know it doesn't feel like a win, but you protected your position while making reasonable compromises. That matters significantly. I feel like I just negotiated away half my daughter." "You negotiated to keep half your daughter. Without today's meeting, you might have lost all of her." The elevator doors opened. Marin stepped inside, feeling the weight of the afternoon pressing down on her shoulders like physical pressure. When she got home, Mrs. Chen was playing peekaboo with Leora on the living room floor. Leora's delighted giggles filled the house, completely oblivious to the fact that her entire world had just been redesigned by lawyers and strangers in a downtown conference room. "How did it go?" Mrs. Chen asked, reading Marin's expression immediately. "We have a custody agreement. He starts visits Friday." Mrs. Chen pulled Marin into a wordless hug while Leora continued babbling happily to herself. "You'll get through this, one day at a time." After Mrs. Chen left, Marin sank onto the floor beside Leora, who immediately crawled into her lap with a stuffed animal she wanted to share. Marin wrapped her arms around the baby, breathing in her familiar scent, memorizing the weight and warmth of her. "Things are changing, sweet girl," Marin whispered against Leora's soft hair. "Someone else is going to love you too. And I have to let him, because it's the right thing to do, even though it's destroying me. But you need to know, I chose you. Even when I knew your story might be complicated, even when I knew loving you was a massive risk, I chose you. And I'd choose you again, 1,000 times over." Leora looked up at her and smiled with complete trust, completely secure in the only love she'd ever consciously known. The next 2 days passed in a haze of anxiety-driven preparation. Marin cleaned obsessively, as if a spotless house would somehow prove she was a superior parent. She documented everything: feeding schedules, sleep patterns, favorite toys, specific diaper cream preferences, creating an exhaustive manual for Heir, as if he were a temporary babysitter rather than a biological father. Thursday night, sleep proved impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined Friday's visit going catastrophically wrong, Leora screaming when Heir held her. Heir criticizing Marin's parenting choices, the fragile peace they'd established crumbling under the pressure of reality. When Friday morning finally arrived, Marin dressed Leora with extra care, a soft yellow dress with embroidered flowers that perfectly matched her golden eyes. If this was the beginning of sharing her daughter, she wanted Leora to look absolutely perfect. Shortly before their agreed time, A familiar black sedan pulled up outside. Marin watched from the window as Thayer emerged, dressed casually in dark jeans and a navy sweater. He looked less like a billionaire CEO and more like a profoundly nervous man about to meet his daughter for only the second time. He knocked at exactly the agreed time, not early, not late, respecting boundaries precisely. Marin opened the door with Leora on her hip. Leora studied Thayer with wide, curious eyes, not quite recognizing him from their brief previous encounter. "Hi," Thayer said softly, his voice gentle. "Hi, Leora." The deliberate use of her chosen name, not Sophia, made something in Marin's chest loosen incrementally. "Come in," Marin said, stepping aside. Thayer entered with visible care, as if the house were constructed from fragile glass that might shatter with sudden movement. He carried a gift bag, which he set on the coffee table. "I brought something for her. I hope that's okay." The store clerk said babies her age respond well to sensory toys. Marin appreciated that he'd sought advice rather than assuming he knew what Leora would enjoy. "You can show her." They settled in the living room, Marin on the couch with Leora, Thayer in the armchair, maintaining respectful distance. He pulled a brightly colored toy from the bag, a soft cube with different textures on each side, crinkly fabric, a tiny mirror, ribbons to pull. "Can I?" He held it out tentatively. Marin nodded, and Thayer moved slowly to sit on the floor near them. He offered the toy to Leora, who regarded it suspiciously before reaching out to grab it. She immediately brought it to her mouth, beginning exploration through taste. "She puts absolutely everything in her mouth right now," Marin explained. "It's her primary way of investigating new objects." "Is that normal developmentally?" "Completely normal for her age." They sat in slightly awkward silence while Leora gnawed contentedly on the toy. Thayer watched her with such focused intensity that Marin wondered if he was trying to memorize every detail against future loss. "Does she always wear yellow?" he asked eventually. "No, but it looks beautiful on her. Brings out the gold in her eyes." "She has my mother's eyes," Thayer said again, wonder coloring his voice, "and her chin, but her nose is pure Cressida." The mention of Cressida created immediate tension. Marin hadn't asked about the biological mother yet, hadn't wanted to humanize the woman who'd abandoned Leora on cold hospital steps. But curiosity finally won. "Have you heard from her since she disappeared?" Thayer's expression darkened noticeably. "Nothing, not a single word. I've tried everything. Her disconnected phone, her deleted social media, her friends all claim they haven't seen or heard from her. It's like she vanished completely." "Did she have family? Someone who might know her location?" "Her parents died when she was young. An aunt raised her, but she passed away a few years ago. No siblings. She was essentially alone, except for me." A wave of unexpected sympathy hit Marin. A woman alone, pregnant, terrified, with no support system, no wonder she'd run. That didn't excuse abandoning a newborn, but it provided context for the desperation. "What was she like?" Marin asked carefully. Before she left, Thayer considered the question, his gaze becoming distant. "Creative, genuinely brilliant in her field. She was a textile artist, created these incredible woven pieces that galleries competed to show. But she struggled significantly with anxiety and depression. I knew that when we got together. I genuinely thought I could help. Thought love would be enough." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out I made everything worse." "How?" "I was never there. Always traveling for work, always prioritizing the company over everything else. She'd beg me to stay home for a single weekend, and I'd promise I would, then get called away for some emergency. That wasn't really an emergency at all. By the time she got pregnant, our relationship was already crumbling. Leora had lost interest in the toy and was crawling toward her basket of books. Thayer watched her movement with visible delight, his whole face lighting up. "She can crawl?" "Since about 6.5 months. She's getting remarkably fast, too. I've had to baby-proof everything aggressively." Marin retrieved a board book, and Leora immediately plopped down to turn pages, babbling commentary at the pictures. "Can I sit closer to her?" Thayer asked carefully. Marin hesitated, then nodded. Thayer moved to sit cross-legged on the floor near Leora, maintaining respectful distance, but close enough to interact. Leora glanced at him, assessed him with those serious golden eyes, then returned attention to her book. "What is she like?" Thayer asked. "Besides books, what makes her laugh?" This was a test, Marin realized. He was asking her to share insider knowledge to teach him how to connect with his daughter. She could withhold information, stay guarded and protective, or she could accept that cooperation was the only viable path forward. She loves when you make animal sounds, Marin said finally, choosing cooperation. Moo, ba, that sort of thing. And she thinks it's absolutely hilarious when you pretend to sneeze. Thayer looked at the book Leora was holding, a farm animal picture book. He pointed at the cow on the page. Leora, what does the cow say? She looked up at him expectantly. Moo! Thayer made the sound with exaggerated enthusiasm. Leora's face split into a huge grin. She slapped the page enthusiastically, demanding repetition. Moo! Thayer repeated, and this time Leora laughed, that deep belly laugh that babies do when something delights them completely. Marin watched her daughter laugh with this stranger, and it hurt in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. But it also stirred something unexpected. Relief, perhaps. Or recognition that Leora deserved all the love she could receive, even if it meant Marin's wasn't exclusive anymore. Thayer cycled through the animals, making increasingly ridiculous sounds that kept Leora giggling. By the time they reached the end of the book, she'd crawled right up to him, patting his knee for continued attention. Can I pick her up? Thayer asked, voice tight with barely contained hope. Every instinct screamed at Marin to refuse, but she forced herself to nod. Thayer lifted Leora with exquisite care, supporting her head even though she was long past needing that particular support. He held her like she was made of impossibly precious glass. Leora studied his face seriously for a long moment, then reached out and grabbed his nose with both hands. Thayer laughed, genuine, joyful, unguarded, and the sound was so authentically happy that Marin felt tears prick her eyes. Hi, sweet girl, Thayer whispered. I'm your dad. I know you don't understand that yet, but I promise I'm going to do everything humanly possible to be worthy of you. Leora responded by trying to put his nose in her mouth, her preferred method of investigation. The planned 30-minute visit stretched to 45 minutes, then an hour. Thayer fed her a snack under Marin's detailed instructions, changed her diaper with only minor fumbling, and played on the floor while she showed him every single toy she owned with proprietary pride. When Leora started rubbing her eyes, the telltale signal that nap time approached, Marin finally intervened. She needs to go down for her nap. She gets genuinely cranky if we push too late. Thayer looked devastated but nodded, understanding. He kissed Leora's forehead gently. I'll see you again soon, okay? Leora, unaware she was being said goodbye to, waved one chubby hand vaguely in his direction before reaching for Marin. Marin carried her upstairs, feeling Thayer's gaze follow them until they disappeared from view. She went through the nap routine on pure muscle memory, her mind still processing what had just happened. It hadn't been terrible. Thayer had been respectful, gentle, clearly trying his absolute best. And Leora had responded to him positively, had laughed with him, had accepted his presence without significant distress, which meant they'd do this again, and again, until one day, Leora would reach for Thayer as naturally as she reached for Marin, until Dada became as automatic as Mama. When Marin came back downstairs, Thayer was standing by the door examining the photos on the wall, pictures of Leora from the past 9 months, documenting every major milestone. You captured everything beautifully, he said quietly. Thank you for that. For documenting her life, even when you didn't know I existed. I didn't do it for you. I know. You did it because you love her. He turned to face her directly. That's something we genuinely have in common now. After he left, Marin stood in her living room, surrounded by toys and baby gear, trying to process the emotional whiplash. She didn't hate him. She desperately wanted to. Would have been so much easier if she could cast him as a villain. But he was just a father who'd lost time with his daughter and was frantically trying to make up for it. That didn't make this easier. It just made it more complicated. That evening, Marin's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number that she now recognized. Thank you for today, for letting me in, even though I know it wasn't easy. She's incredible. You've done an amazing job with her. Next visit Monday, same time, R. Thayer. She stared at the message for a long time before typing back, Monday works. The visits became routine over the following weeks. Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. Thayer showed up exactly on time every single visit, always with a small, appropriate gift, a rattle, a teething toy, A book, always respectful of Marin's boundaries and established rules. And slowly, impossibly, Leora began to recognize him. Her face would light up when he arrived. She'd crawl to him eagerly, demanding attention. She started babbling dada sounds that might have been coincidence but felt devastatingly significant. By the third week, Heir asked if he could stay for lunch. By the fourth week, he was arriving earlier and staying longer, the boundaries naturally expanding. They developed an unexpected rhythm. Heir would play with Leora, while Marin handled dishes, or folded laundry. Ordinary domestic tasks that felt surreal, with a billionaire CEO in her living room making airplane noises to amuse a baby. Sometimes they talked during these moments. Small things, initially. Leora's sleep schedule, a funny thing she did. Concerns about a rash that turned out to be nothing serious. Then, gradually deeper topics emerged. Heir's childhood with a single mother. Marin's marriage and divorce. The grief they'd both carried in different forms. Week 5, they took Leora to the park together. Marin pushed the swing while Heir spotted her on the baby slide. Strangers probably assumed they were a normal family, mom, dad, baby. The thought made Marin uncomfortable, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Week 6, Heir extended his standing invitation. Come see the estate, the guest house I mentioned. Just a look, no pressure. But I want you to understand what I'm offering if this arrangement becomes too complicated logistically. Marin had almost refused automatically, but curiosity won. She wanted to see where the man who shared her daughter actually lived. The estate was massive, 15 acres of meticulously maintained grounds, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and steel that belonged in design magazines. A pool that looked like it came from a luxury resort. But the guest house felt different, charming and cozy. A stone cottage that seemed separate from the main estate's intimidating luxury. It has 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, completely private yard, Heir explained as he showed her around. Totally self-contained. You'd have complete privacy and independence. And Leora could move between here and the main house, get comfortable with both spaces gradually. You're seriously suggesting I move here? I'm seriously suggesting it would make co-parenting significantly easier. Practically speaking, we're already spending half our time together anyway. This would just eliminate the constant transitions and give Leora the stability of not being shuttled between 2 separate locations. Marin walked through the cottage, imagining their life transplanted here. It was objectively beautiful, nicer than anywhere she could afford on her own. But it would mean giving up her independence, living on Heir's property, becoming further entangled in his world. I need to think about it, she said. Of course, no pressure whatsoever. But there was pressure. The unspoken reality that fighting Heir long-term would be financially devastating for Marin. That he could wait her out, exhaust her resources, simply outlast her objections. That cooperation was survival, whether she wanted to admit it or not. You might be wondering how someone makes a choice like this between pride and pragmatism, between the home you built and the one being offered. You make it every single day, in small concessions and careful compromises, until one morning you wake up and realize your life looks nothing like what you planned, but somehow still feels recognizably yours. That evening, after Leora was asleep, Marin sat in her small kitchen reviewing the custody agreement Fletcher had finalized. Joint legal custody, primary physical with her, generous visitation for Heir, all formally documented and legally binding. It was official now, permanent, irreversible. Her phone rang, Heir calling rather than texting. Sorry to bother you after hours, he said. But there's a board meeting next week in New York that I genuinely can't miss. It's 2 days. I hate the idea of not seeing Leora during that time, but professional obligations. It's fine, Marin interrupted. You don't need my permission to work. Just let me know when you're back, and we'll resume the normal schedule. A pause. Thank you for understanding. Some lawyers would tell me to fight for those lost hours, make up the time elsewhere. I'm not trying to keep her from you, Heir, despite what you might think. I'm starting to realize that. After hanging up, Marin wondered when the shift had happened, when the enemy had become Heir, when fury had mellowed into reluctant acceptance tinged with something approaching mutual respect. Maybe compromise looked like this. Not giving up everything you wanted, but releasing the anger about not getting it. The weeks continued blurring together. Visits lengthened. Marin spent increasing time at the estate, finding it easier to let Leora play in the larger space with professional baby-proofing. Thayer started calling with random questions. Was Leora eating enough vegetables? Should they consider swimming lessons? When did babies typically start walking? And somewhere in those daily conversations and shared parenting moments, something unexpected developed. They became friends. Not close friends, not confidants who shared everything, but people who could laugh together when Leora smashed spaghetti in her hair during dinner, who could seamlessly trade off entertaining a cranky baby with the practiced ease of a team, who respected each other's competence even when they disagreed on specific approaches. 3 months after that first terrifying knock on her door, Marin sat in Thayer's kitchen. She'd started thinking of it as Thayer's kitchen, rather than the billionaire's estate. Feeding Leora dinner while Thayer worked nearby on his laptop. It felt domestic, comfortable, nothing remotely like she'd imagined her life would look. "I've been thinking," Thayer said, closing the laptop to give her full attention. "About the guest house offer. I know you said you needed time, but your apartment lease comes up soon, right?" Marin's stomach clenched. She'd been avoiding this decision for weeks, but practical reality was approaching fast. End of next month. Move in. Not because I'm pushing, but because objectively it makes sense. We're spending half our time here already anyway. Leora's completely comfortable in this environment now. You'd save substantially on rent. We'd have much more scheduling flexibility. And, he paused, you'd still have complete independence, your own space. This isn't about control. Then what is it about? It's about making co-parenting as easy as possible for both of us, and giving Leora the stability of not being constantly transported between 2 separate locations. He made frustratingly logical sense. Marin hated that he made logical sense. What happens if this doesn't work? If we fight? If things get complicated? Then you leave. The guest house is yours, rent-free for as long as you want it, conflict or not. I'll put it in legally binding writing if that helps. The offer was extraordinarily generous, which made it inherently suspicious. Or maybe it just made her cynical after years of expecting the worst. "I'll think about it," she said again. But this time, they both knew she was going to say yes. Because the alternative, continuing to live in her cramped apartment, managing constant transitions, watching her savings slowly drain while Thayer's resources remained infinite, wasn't sustainable long-term. This was the path of least resistance, possibly even the path of greatest wisdom. Week 14 after that first devastating knock on her door, Marin signed a lease for the guest house and began packing up her apartment. Avery thought she was making a strategic mistake. "You're putting yourself in an extremely vulnerable position. Living on his property, financially dependent on his goodwill legal protections, only go so far. I'll have everything documented, legal safeguards in place." Legal protections don't prevent power imbalances from existing. Marin knew Avery was right to be concerned, but she also understood that fighting Thayer indefinitely would destroy her financially and emotionally. Drain her savings, exhaust her spirit, steal time she could be spending actually parenting instead of battling in courtrooms. This was the path of least resistance, possibly even the path of most wisdom. The move happened on a Saturday. Thayer hired professional movers so Marin didn't have to lift anything herself. He stayed conspicuously absent in the main house while they transported her belongings, giving her space to settle without his presence, creating awkwardness. By evening, most of her things were unpacked in rooms that felt simultaneously like home and like a stranger's space, her furniture and photos in a cottage that existed on someone else's property. Leora, oblivious to the significance, crawled around, exploring with pure delight. To her, this was just an exciting new adventure. A knock at the door, Thayer holding 2 containers of takeout. "Thought you might not feel like cooking after a full day of moving." Marin was too exhausted to be proud. "Thank you. That's genuinely thoughtful." They ate at her new kitchen table, while Leora played contentedly on the floor nearby. The conversation flowed easily, now comfortable small talk that covered necessary topics without requiring deep vulnerability. But then, Thayer said something that shifted the entire dynamic. "I'm glad you're here. Not just for logistical convenience, though that certainly helps, but because Leora seems happier when we're both accessible. And if I'm being completely honest, I am too. Marin looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Thayer's expression was carefully neutral. Just that you're good company. I didn't expect that when all this started. Didn't expect to actually like you as a person. The confession hung between them, weighted with implications neither seemed ready to fully examine. I didn't expect to like you either, Marin admitted finally. You were supposed to be the villain in this story. Sorry to disappoint your narrative expectations. They smiled at each other across the table, and something shifted. Something potentially dangerous. Marin looked away first. It's been an exhausting day. I should get Leora ready for bed. Thayer took the hint and left. But the moment lingered as she went through the familiar bedtime routine. The way he'd looked at her. The warmth in his voice when he said he was glad she was there. They were co-parents. Friendly co-parents who'd learned to cooperate effectively. Nothing more. That's what she told herself as she climbed into bed in her new house, on the property of a man she'd once hated and now couldn't quite define. But late that night, when she couldn't sleep and wandered to the kitchen for water, she saw light still burning in the main house. A silhouette visible through the windows there at his desk, working late as usual. She wondered if he looked out sometimes too, if he felt the strangeness of their situation, the unexpected intimacy that shared parenting created between two people who hadn't planned for any of this. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt inevitable. 3 months passed in their new arrangement. New rhythms established themselves. Thayer would come to the cottage for breakfast most mornings, or Marin would bring Leora to the main house. They'd coordinate schedules via text, trade off childcare responsibilities when work demanded it, slowly building the kind of seamless partnership that looked like family from the outside. And somewhere in those daily interactions, the boundaries started blurring. It started with small things. His hand on her lower back as they walked Leora into her first music class. Her fingers brushing his when they passed toys between them. Lingering glances across rooms that lasted just slightly too long to be casual. 6 months into living at the estate, on Leora's first birthday, they threw a party that included everyone who mattered. Mrs. Chen, Avery, and Fletcher. Some of Thayer's business associates, Marin's nursing friends, and at their mutual decision after long discussion, Cressida. Because Cressida had finally surfaced. The phone call had come on a Tuesday afternoon while Marin was folding laundry. An unfamiliar number she almost didn't answer. Hello? Heavy breathing on the other end. Then a woman's voice, shaking and uncertain. Is this Marin Holiday? Yes. Who is this? A long, loaded pause. My name is Cressida Bloom. I believe you're raising my daughter. The laundry basket slipped from Marin's hands, clean clothes scattering across the floor in forgotten chaos. There's a particular fear that lives in every parent who's built their family through unconventional means. The biological parent returning to reclaim what biology says belongs to them. For Marin, this call was that fear-given voice. How did you get this number? Marin managed through a throat that had gone completely dry. I've been trying to find her for months, trying to get healthy first, before I reached out. I saw the news coverage about Thayer's custody case. Everyone saw it. I knew then where she was, that she was safe. You abandoned her on hospital steps. Marin's voice turned to ice. You left her alone with nothing but a blanket, and disappeared. You don't get to call her your daughter. I know what I did was unforgivable. Cressida's voice broke completely. I was drowning in postpartum depression, crippling anxiety, and I had absolutely no one. Thayer was never there. I was utterly alone, and I convinced myself she'd be better off without me destroying her life, that I'd only ruin everything I touched. So, you left her on concrete steps, where she could have died? I watched from my car until someone found her. A nurse. I made absolutely certain she was picked up safely before I drove away. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I haven't forgiven myself. I'm asking if I can see her. Once. Just to know she's truly okay. Marin's hands trembled violently. You can't just reappear after 10 months and demand access. There are legal processes. Custody agreements already in place. I don't want custody. I know I don't deserve that. I just want to see her face. To tell her I'm sorry, even though she won't remember or understand. Please. The raw desperation in Cressida's voice was almost unbearable to hear. Marin wanted to refuse immediately, to protect Leora from this woman who'd caused so much pain. But something in her, the part that understood how mental illness could warp judgment beyond recognition, the part that remembered her own darkest days, after losing Emma, hesitated. I need to talk to Heir, and our lawyers. You can't just show up here. I understand completely. Thank you for not hanging up immediately. After getting Cressida's contact information, Marin ended the call and immediately dialed Heir. Cressida called me, just now. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Marin checked to see if the call had dropped. When? Heir finally asked, his voice dangerously quiet. 5 minutes ago. She wants to see Leora. Absolutely not. His response was immediate and unequivocal. She lost that right when she abandoned our daughter like garbage. She says she was struggling with severe postpartum depression, that she's been getting treatment. I don't care what her excuses are. She doesn't get to traumatize Leora by appearing out of nowhere after nearly a year. Marin understood his fury, felt it herself, burning in her chest. But she also heard the genuine pain beneath Cressida's words, the self-loathing of someone who'd made an irreversible mistake during her most broken moment. Maybe we should at least hear what she has to say. With lawyers present, completely controlled environment, nowhere near Leora. Whose side are you on? Heir's question came out sharper than he probably intended. Leora's side. Always hers. But what happens when she's older and asks about her birth mother? Do we tell her we refuse to even listen to the woman who gave her life? Heir exhaled heavily, audibly struggling with the decision. I'll call Fletcher, set up a meeting. But Cressida doesn't get anywhere near Leora until we're absolutely certain she's stable and her intentions are genuine and safe. That evening, Heir came to the cottage, looking like he'd aged years in hours. They'd agreed to meet with Cressida the following Saturday, neutral location, both legal teams present, Leora safely with Mrs. Chen, who adored her. I cannot believe she has the audacity to call after everything. Heir paced Marin's small living room with barely contained rage. 10 months of complete silence while I was losing my sanity searching for our daughter, and now she casually rings you up asking for visiting privileges? She didn't sound casual. She sounded completely broken. Good. She should be broken. Marin recognized this version of Heir, the ruthless CEO who'd built an empire through strategic thinking and absolute unwillingness to accept defeat. It was different from the gentle father who made silly voices to entertain Leora. I know you're furious, but she's still Leora's biological mother. That's an unchangeable fact we can't erase. Biology doesn't make someone a parent. Showing up makes someone a parent. Love and consistency make someone a parent. She demonstrated none of that. He was right. And yet, Marin couldn't shake the memory of her own darkness after Emma's stillbirth. The days she physically couldn't leave bed. The intrusive thoughts that terrified her. The absolute conviction that everyone would be better off without her poisonous presence. If she'd had a living baby during that time, instead of an empty nursery, could she have made a desperate, terrible choice? Let's just see what she says at the meeting, Marin suggested gently. Then we decide together what happens next. Heir's shoulders relaxed incrementally. Together, I appreciate that we're a unified we in this. The comment hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Marin chose not to examine it too carefully. Saturday arrived with oppressive humidity and threatening gray skies. The meeting was scheduled for early afternoon at Fletcher Dane's office-neutral professional territory, where emotions could be contained by mahogany walls and legal protocols. Marin dressed like she was preparing for battle. Professional armor in navy blue. Heir picked her up, and they drove in tense silence, both mentally preparing for confrontation. Fletcher's office was all dark wood and intimidating leather furniture. Cressida was already waiting when they arrived, sitting alone in the reception area. Hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles had gone white. She looked nothing like Marin expected. Young, probably late 20s, with wild auburn curls barely restrained, thin to the point of looking fragile, dark circles under eyes that were swollen from recent crying. She wore simple jeans and an oversized sweater. When she saw Heir, she physically flinched like she'd been struck. Heir, she whispered, his name barely audible. Cressida. His voice was absolute ice. Fletcher emerged from her office, followed by a man introduced as Cressida's attorney, Marcus Webb. They all filed into the conference room in loaded silence. Fletcher opened with professional formality. We're here at Miss Bloom's request to discuss potential supervised visitation with the minor child, Leora Sophia Holiday Boone. Miss Bloom, please state your position clearly. Cressida's hands trembled as she pulled out a folder. I've been in intensive treatment for postpartum depression and generalized anxiety disorder for the last 7 months. I have complete documentation from my psychiatrist, my therapist, and the women's mental health facility, where I was an inpatient for 6 weeks. She slid papers across the table: medical records, detailed treatment notes, a comprehensive letter from her psychiatrist outlining her diagnosis and substantial progress. I'm not here to take her from you, Cressida continued, looking between Marin and Heir with desperate sincerity. I know I don't deserve custody. I know what I did was unforgivable and will haunt me forever. But I'm her biological mother, and I need her to know someday that I didn't abandon her because I didn't love her. I abandoned her because I was desperately sick and genuinely believed she'd be better off without me ruining her life. That's a very convenient narrative, Heir said coldly. Easy to claim mental illness now that we've done all the actual hard work of parenting. You're absolutely right. It is convenient. It's also completely true. Cressida's eyes filled with tears that spilled over unchecked. I know you hate me. I hate myself more than you ever could. But please don't punish Sophia Leora by keeping her from knowing where she came from. Her name is Leora. I named her Sophia, after your mother, who I knew you loved more than anything, because I loved you, Heir, and I wanted our daughter to carry that legacy forward. Cressida's voice shattered. I know you don't believe me anymore, but I did love you. I just couldn't handle the constant loneliness, the overwhelming pressure, the paralyzing fear that I was failing her every single day. Marin watched this exchange, seeing both perspectives with painful clarity. Heir's betrayal and rage were completely justified, but Cressida's desperation and crushing self-loathing were also devastatingly real. What exactly are you asking for? Marin asked, breaking the tense silence. Cressida turned to her with visible gratitude. Supervised visits? Once a month? Maybe less. Just an hour where I can see her? Hold her if she lets me. Tell her I'm sorry even though she won't understand. I'll sign any legal documents saying I won't pursue custody. I'll agree to any restrictions you require. I just need to be a small part of her life, even if it's only as a distant figure in the background. Fletcher interjected smoothly. We'd require updated psychiatric evaluations, home visits to verify stable living conditions, and a very gradual introduction plan similar to what was implemented with Mr. Boone initially. I'll do absolutely anything you require, Cressida said immediately, desperately. Heir stood abruptly. I need a minute. He left the conference room, and Marin followed instinctively, catching him in the hallway. He was staring out the window at the parking lot below, jaw clenched, hands fisted at his sides. If we agree to this, it validates what she did, he said without looking at Marin. It tells her that abandoning our daughter was somehow forgivable if you claim mental illness. We're not saying it's forgivable. We're acknowledging that mental illness is devastatingly complicated, and people make terrible choices when they're drowning in darkness they can't escape. Why are you defending her? I'm not defending her actions. I'm acknowledging that illness can make people unrecognizable to themselves. Marin moved to stand beside him. If this were you, if you'd done something unforgivable during your absolute darkest moment, wouldn't you want a chance at some form of redemption? Heir finally looked at her directly. I wouldn't have abandoned my child. You don't know that. None of us know what we're capable of when we're that completely lost. The truth settled between them like a physical weight. After a long, loaded moment, Heir sighed heavily. If we do this, she gets supervised visits only. Monthly maximum, 30 minutes. With you or me present always. One single violation of boundaries, one concerning behavior, and we're permanently done. Agreed completely. They returned to the conference room, where Fletcher was reviewing preliminary documents with both attorneys. Heir outlined his terms with CEO precision and absolute clarity. Cressida agreed to everything without any negotiation, relief flooding her features. The first visit was scheduled for 2 weeks, out enough time for updated psychiatric evaluations and for everyone to prepare emotionally. As they left the office, Cressida caught Marin's arm gently in the hallway. Thank you for advocating when you didn't have to. I know you have every reason to hate me. Marin pulled away from the touch. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because Leora deserves to know her complete story someday, and your birth mother never tried to know you shouldn't be part of that narrative. I understand. Thank you anyway. In the car, Thayer drove in brooding silence until they were almost home. Then, you're better at forgiveness than I am, more generous with grace. I'm not forgiving her, I'm just trying to navigate impossible complexity without making it worse. Maybe they're the same thing. Perhaps they were. Marin had spent years learning that people were rarely purely good or evil. They were usually just broken in different ways, doing their desperate best with limited tools and overwhelming fear. The weeks before Cressida's visit were tense. Thayer second-guessed the decision constantly. Marin researched postpartum depression extensively and found statistics that made her heart ache, the staggering number of women who suffered in complete silence. Mothers with intrusive thoughts about harming themselves or their babies. Women who made permanent choices during temporary psychiatric crises. When the day finally arrived, they brought Leora to Fletcher's office again, the most neutral space available. Cressida arrived punctually, accompanied by Marcus Webb and her therapist, Dr. Helena Reeves. Leora, now 10 months old and confidently toddling everywhere, had no idea the woman in the chair was the one who'd given birth to her. She clung to Marin's leg, studying the strangers with serious curiosity. Cressida's face crumpled completely the moment she saw her daughter. She's so beautiful. She looks exactly like Thayer's mother. Would you like to say hello? Dr. Reeves prompted gently. Cressida nodded, unable to speak through tears. She knelt on the floor, maintaining careful distance. Hi, Sophia. Leora. Hi, sweet pea. Leora watched her solemnly, then buried her face in Marin's leg shyly. It's okay, Cressida whispered. I know you don't know me. I'm just so happy to see you're healthy and clearly loved. For 30 minutes, Cressida sat on the floor talking softly to Leora, who gradually warmed enough to show off her walking skills and offer a toy from across the safe distance. They didn't touch Leora wasn't comfortable enough, and Cressida respected that boundary absolutely. When time was up, Cressida didn't argue or beg for extension. She simply said, "Thank you for letting me see her. She's absolutely perfect." After she left, Thayer exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the entire time. That was harder than I expected it to be. She genuinely loves her, Marin observed quietly. In her own broken way, she really does. Love isn't enough sometimes. No, but it's something. The visits continued monthly through the following months. Slowly, over consistent showing up, Leora began to recognize Cressida. By the 5th visit, she'd accept a hug. By the 8th visit, she'd play with toys Cressida brought. It wasn't the deep bond Leora shared with Marin and Thayer, but it was real and growing. And somewhere in those months of navigating 3-parent dynamics and blended family complexity, Marin and Thayer's relationship shifted irreversibly into something neither could deny anymore. It happened in increments, his hand on her lower back becoming routine, her fingers threading through his when they walked, lingering glances that stopped being accidental. Inside jokes that felt like intimacy reserved for couples. 6 months after Marin moved to the estate, on Leora's first birthday party, they hosted everyone who mattered. Mrs. Chen came, along with Avery and Fletcher, some of Thayer's business associates, Marin's nursing friends, and at their mutual decision, Cressida. Leora wore a white dress with rainbow ruffles and a tiny sparkly crown. She demolished her smash cake with gleeful abandon while adults cheered and captured photos. Opening presents became a joyful group effort with 3 parents helping, which should have felt strange but somehow worked beautifully. That evening, after guests departed and Leora finally crashed into exhausted sleep, Marin and Thayer cleaned up together. They'd perfected this rhythm. He loaded the dishwasher while she wiped counters. They both tackled the living room's explosion of wrapping paper and discarded bows. "Thank you for today," Thayer said quietly. "For making Cressida feel included when that couldn't have been easy. For being so gracious. She's trying hard. That counts for something. You're remarkably generous-spirited." Thayer set down the dish he'd been holding and turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever think about us? Not as co-parents or friends, but as something else entirely?" The question hung in the space between them, dangerous and electric and utterly inevitable. Marin's heart hammered against her ribs. "Thayer, because I think about it constantly. About you. about what we could be if we stopped fighting it and let ourselves actually feel what's happening here. We can't. It would complicate everything we've built. Or it would finally acknowledge what already exists. He took a step closer, closing the physical distance. We're already living together, raising a child together, making major life decisions together. The only thing we're not doing is admitting we have real feelings for each other. You don't know how I feel, don't I? Another step, his voice dropping lower. You look at me the same way I look at you. Like you're trying desperately not to want something you absolutely do want. Marin's breath caught. He was right. She'd been fighting this attraction for months, telling herself it was wrong, that mixing romance with custody arrangements was asking for disaster. But standing in his kitchen late at night, with their daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs, and years of their intertwined life stretched before them, denying it felt impossible. What if it doesn't work? She whispered. What if we try this and it falls apart catastrophically? What if it does work? What if we deny ourselves genuine happiness because we're too afraid to take a risk on something real? He reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness. I'm falling in love with you, Marin. I think I have been since you first let me hold her, even though you were terrified and I was disrupting your entire existence. The confession broke something loose in her chest. I'm terrified. Me too. But I'm more terrified of looking back someday and regretting that I never tried, that we never gave this a real chance. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff simultaneously. Gentle at first, questioning, then deeper when she answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him closer. They broke apart breathless, foreheads resting together in the quiet kitchen. What do we do now? Marin asked. We take it slow. We don't tell Leora anything, yet she's too young to understand complex adult relationships anyway. We just see where this goes, naturally. Okay. Okay? Yeah. Marin smiled despite her lingering fear. Let's see where this goes. They started dating in secret, which felt ridiculous given they lived on the same property and spent every day together anyway. But there was something thrilling about stolen kisses when Leora wasn't looking. Late-night conversations that turned into falling asleep tangled together on the couch, gradually blurring the line between the guest house and the main house until Marin wasn't entirely sure which one was actually home anymore. 3 months into their relationship, Heir proposed a trip. There's a tech conference in San Francisco next month that I genuinely can't skip. Come with me. We'll bring Leora, make a real family vacation out of it. As co-parents or as a couple. Both. All of it. I'm tired of pretending we're not together. I want to be publicly us. The trip became a turning point. Away from familiar surroundings and routine, they could be openly affectionate, holding hands as they pushed Leora's stroller through Golden Gate Park, sharing meals without carefully maintained distance, booking a hotel suite with one bedroom for them, and a small connecting room for Leora. It felt like playing house, except it wasn't play. It was real life, just unfolding in an unconventional order that worked for them. On their last night in San Francisco after Leora was deeply asleep, they had dinner at the hotel restaurant with sweeping views of the glittering city. I need to tell you something, Heir said, his expression unusually serious. And I don't want you to feel pressured or rushed, but I also can't keep it to myself anymore. Marin's stomach flipped nervously. Okay, I want to marry you. Not immediately, not tomorrow whenever you're ready, if you ever are. But I need you to know that this isn't casual for me. You're not just Leora's mom, or my co-parent, or even my girlfriend. You're the person I want to build my entire life with. Tears pricked Marin's eyes. That's terrifying and wonderful simultaneously. Is that a yes? It's a, I need time to process, but I'm definitely not saying no. Heir smiled, reaching across the table to take her hand. I'll take it. Flying home with Leora contentedly watching cartoons on a tablet between them, Marin allowed herself to imagine a future that had seemed impossible a year ago. Marriage. A real family built from broken pieces. Maybe even more children someday. The pieces were falling into place in ways she'd never planned but couldn't help wanting desperately. Back home, they officially moved Marin into the main house permanently. The guest cottage became Heir's home office, a space separate from family chaos where he could work undisturbed. Leora adjusted seamlessly, thrilled to have her own proper bedroom in the big house, decorated with clouds painted on the ceiling and a custom-built reading nook. Cressida took the news of their relationship with surprising grace during her next visit. "I'm genuinely glad you found each other," she told them with apparent sincerity. She deserves parents who are real partners, not just people following a custody schedule. Her mental health had stabilized remarkably. She'd returned to her textile art with renewed passion, had a small gallery showing scheduled, was living independently and working with her therapist twice weekly. The visits with Leora continued steadily, and while they'd never be mother-daughter in the traditional sense, there was genuine affection building there, recognition, and growing love. 1 year after that first devastating knock on Marin's apartment door, they gathered in Avery's office to finalize crucial paperwork. Marin was officially adopting Leora, joining Heir as equal legal parents. The adoption that had been suspended could now proceed with both of them. Avery pushed the final documents across her desk. "This makes it official and permanent. Leora Sophia Holiday Boone has 2 fully equal legal parents. Congratulations to both of you." Marin felt tears slide down her cheeks as she signed with a hand that trembled slightly. Heir's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently with shared emotion. That evening at the estate, Heir cooked dinner, a skill he deliberately developed over the past year, motivated by wanting to contribute more than just financial resources. Leora, now 17 months old, and talking in short, enthusiastic sentences, helped by making creative messes with flour meant for pancakes. After dinner, after bath time and stories and tucking Leora into her bed surrounded by stuffed animals, Marin found Heir on the back terrace overlooking the grounds they'd come to think of as home. "Hi," she said, sliding into the comfortable space beside him. "Hi, yourself." They sat in companionable silence, the kind that comes from truly knowing another person's rhythms and needs. Then Heir pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I know I already asked, sort of, and I know we said no rush or pressure, but I've been carrying this around for 2 months, waiting for the perfect moment, and I realized there is no perfect moment. There's just life, messy and beautiful, and happening right now in real time." He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the terrace lights. "Marin Holiday, will you marry me? Will you let me officially be your partner in all this beautiful chaos? Will you keep making me better? Keep calling me out when I work too much? Keep being the most incredible mother to our daughter and whatever children we might have in the future?" Our daughter. The words made everything real and permanent. "Yes," Marin whispered through happy tears. "Yes, to absolutely all of it." The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. They got married 3 months later in a small, intimate ceremony on the estate grounds they both loved. Mrs. Chen officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this occasion. Avery and Fletcher stood as witnesses, their professional relationship having evolved into genuine friendship. Cressida sent beautiful flowers and a heartfelt card but didn't attend, respecting that this was Marin and Heir's day to celebrate. Leora, 20 months old and determined to be involved in absolutely everything, served as flower girl with Mrs. Chen's patient help. She toddled down the makeshift aisle, throwing petals with enthusiastic abandon, then plopped down in the front row and announced loudly, "I hungry." The assembled guests laughed with genuine affection. Heir promised her snacks immediately after. The ceremony continued, with vows they'd written themselves through many emotional late-night conversations. "I promise to be your true partner, not just your co-parent," Heir said, his voice thick with barely controlled emotion. "I promise to show up every single day, even when it's difficult. I promise to love Leora and any future children we're blessed with using everything I am. And I promise to love you the same way completely, imperfectly, but always with my whole heart." Marin's vows were characteristically simpler but no less meaningful. "You came into my life and disrupted absolutely everything. You scared me, challenged me, and ultimately made me so much better. I promise to keep doing the same for you. I promise to build this family with you, whatever unexpected shape it takes. I promise to love you and our daughter with everything I have." Mrs. Chen pronounced them married with visible joy, and they kissed while Leora cheered and immediately demanded promised cake. The reception was deliberately casual catered food, a carefully curated playlist instead of a live band, Friends and chosen family dancing under string lights as the sun set in gorgeous colors. Marin wore a simple flowing white dress and wildflowers woven through her hair. Heir had ditched his suit jacket within minutes, rolling up his sleeves to chase Leora around the yard in an impromptu game. Looking at her husband playing with their daughter, surrounded by people who'd supported them through impossible challenges, Marin felt overwhelmed with profound gratitude. A year ago, she'd been terrified of losing everything. Today, she had more than she'd ever imagined possible. "You look genuinely happy," Avery said, appearing beside her with champagne. "I am. Surprisingly, impossibly happy." "You deserve it. You both do." Maybe they did. Or maybe happiness wasn't actually about deserving. It was about showing up consistently, making hard choices with integrity, and being willing to let life surprise you with unexpected gifts. 5 years later, Leora started first grade on a Tuesday morning in early September. At 6 years old, she was confident, curious, and entirely unconcerned about the milestone that had both her parents fighting tears in the kitchen. "Mama, you're crying again," Leora observed with 6-year-old matter-of-factness, looking up at Marin with those distinctive golden eyes. "I'm just so proud of you. It's just school. It's your first day of big kid school. We're allowed to be emotional." Heir appeared in the kitchen doorway holding their 3-year-old son, Theo, who was demanding pancakes with increasing volume. "Ready to go?" They drove to the school together, the whole family, including Theo, who insisted on walking his big sister to her classroom personally. Leora tolerated his enthusiasm with the patient resignation of an older sibling who'd learned to accept adoration. At the classroom door, she hugged them each quickly and efficiently, then turned to her teacher with confident self-assurance. "I'm Leora Holiday Boone. I like reading and I already know how to write all the letters in cursive." Just like that, she walked into her new world without looking back or hesitating. In the car afterward, Marin and Heir sat in slightly shell-shocked silence. "She didn't need us at all," Heir said, with mixed pride and melancholy. "She didn't need us," Marin agreed quietly. "When did that happen?" "Gradually over time, I think. And then all at once this morning." Back home after dropping Theo at his preschool, Marin headed to the hospital for her nursing shift. She'd moved to part-time when Theo was born, finding a sustainable balance between career fulfillment and family presence that worked for everyone. Heir had made similar significant adjustments at Boone Industries, promoting a highly capable COO who handled daily operations while Heir focused on big-picture strategy and innovation. He worked from home 3 days weekly now, consistently present for breakfast and bedtime, coaching Leora's weekend soccer team, actually living the work-life balance he'd only discussed theoretically before becoming a father. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner, a nightly tradition Heir insisted on maintaining unless someone was traveling. Leora entertained them with animated stories from her first day, while Theo tried repeatedly to steal food from her plate. After the kids were in bed, Marin and Heir ended up on their terrace again, the same spot where he'd proposed years ago. "Cressida's gallery opening is next week," Marin mentioned casually. "Leora wants to go support her." "Of course she does. She's proud of her." Cressida's role in Leora's life had evolved into something resembling a beloved aunt present, but not primary, loving, but not central. She saw the kids monthly on a consistent schedule, sent thoughtful birthday presents, attended special events when invited. The relationship was remarkably healthy for everyone involved, considering how it started. "Did you ever imagine this?" Marin asked, leaning into his familiar warmth. "When you showed up at my apartment that day?" "No. I imagined a brutal custody battle, maybe awkward joint holidays if we were extremely lucky. I didn't imagine falling completely in love with you. Didn't imagine us building an actual family that works. Life's wonderfully weird. Life's absolutely perfect." Marin smiled. "Not perfect. We fight about screen time limits and whose turn it is for bedtime duty. We stress about finances sometimes, even though you're a billionaire. Because you refuse to let me pay for absolutely everything. Because I need to contribute meaningfully. We're not perfect at all. We're perfect for each other. That's what counts." It did count. After everything, the fear, the legal battles, the hard conversations, the constant negotiation and compromise, they'd built something genuinely real. Something worth protecting fiercely. Upstairs, Leora climbed out of bed one more time, a habit she'd never quite outgrown despite their best efforts. She patted down to where her parents sat on the terrace enjoying the evening. "Can't sleep?" Marin asked, pulling her into her lap even though she was getting almost too big for it. "I was thinking." "About what, sweetheart?" "About how lucky I am." "That's what Miss Roberts said today. We should think about what makes us lucky before we sleep each night." Thayer kissed the top of her head gently. "And what makes you lucky?" "I have Mama and Daddy who love me so much, and Theo, even though he's super annoying sometimes, and Cressida, who makes me beautiful things and tells me stories, and Mrs. Chen, who makes the absolute best cookies." She continued her list, her child's view of abundance completely unfettered by the complexity of how this unconventional family came to exist. When she finally finished cataloging her blessings, Thayer carried her back to bed. Marin tucked her in with practiced care, and they stood in the doorway, watching her drift peacefully into sleep. "We did remarkably well," Thayer whispered. "Yeah," Marin agreed softly. "We really did." They walked back downstairs, hand in hand, partners in all the ways that truly mattered. The house settled into peaceful nighttime quiet, 2 children sleeping safely in their rooms, 2 parents grateful for the impossible becoming beautifully possible. When people ask how a story like this actually ends, they want neat closure. They want confirmation that love conquers all effortlessly, that blended families work seamlessly without struggle, that everyone lives happily ever after without ongoing complications. The truth is inevitably messier. There are still genuinely hard days. Leora sometimes asks why she has 3 parents when other kids have 2, requiring age-appropriate conversations about unconventional families. Theo doesn't quite understand why Cressida isn't grandma like other grandmothers. Marin and Thayer disagree about parenting approaches regularly and have to negotiate compromises. But they show up consistently. They have hard conversations with honesty and respect. They choose each other and their children every single day with intention. And that not perfection, but persistent, imperfect commitment is the real happily ever after. Some families are born through traditional means. Some are painstakingly built from broken pieces and second chances. The strongest ones are both biology and choice intertwined so completely you can't separate them anymore. And this family, forged through crisis and choice and relentless commitment to doing what was best for a child, was exactly as strong as it needed to be.